Morning and good afternoon. Welcome back to another Student View podcast led by myself and Fabian, and we have a special guest today. So today we've explored outside of the campus, maybe it's the best way of saying it. So it's probably best she introduces herself, but yeah, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Max. I'm 21 years old. I do the Bioscience Entrepreneurship program. I was born in Belgium, lived all around the world. In high school, I thought about maybe doing engineering, but then I was really interested in biosciences more, and also sort of like the business perspective of things. So then for my undergraduate, I did more a like liberal arts and sciences program. So I was able to combine like sciences and sort of like things outside of it. I hadn't really fully realized the economics or business sort of perspective, so I focused mainly on pre-medicine with a focus on neuroscience, like gut microbiome and inflammation sort of things. And then I realized that, most people in my program, they just go into a lab, and I said, that's not what I want to do. Then some people become doctors. I said, doesn't feel right either. So I decided to come to UCL, study bioscience entrepreneurship, where I kind of then learned to take that scientific knowledge that I have and build up in my undergraduate and sort of commercialize it into high impact ventures, or also even from an investment perspective, learn how to analyze startups and sort of see which one could have like the most potential and understand the science behind it. And besides that, I love to go have a walk with my dog, or crochet, or Pilates, or some sort of thing, or even read about FemTech in my free time. I love it. Or even record an episode for my own podcast. Young and Hot, you can find it on Spotify. Thank you.
To link that, of course. You remember to do that.
I think that's a really unique pathway, isn't it? And the fact that you kind of combined your medical, I would say, experience,
pre-medicine, to
entrepreneurship is really exceptional. Why did you ultimately choose to do bioscience entrepreneurship and not just entrepreneurship? Because I mean, from the VC perspective and from the investor point of view, it would make also maybe more sense, but it would also make sense to like go into the plain entrepreneurship track. Why didn't you choose for that?
That's a very good question. Well, for me, I've always been fascinated about the entrepreneurship side, but science was really important to me. I am someone who's very much into healthcare and into medicine and into like well-being in general. And so to completely drop that science part was not really an option for me. I did consider like backup options in case I didn't go into UCL. I did my undergraduate in Amsterdam, and so I would have done a pre-master to like the business course and then sort of like tried to combine the science aspect myself. But that obviously would have been a bit harder to do. And then I got into UCL anyway, so I was like, I'm packing my bags. I'm going to UCL, where now I like learned a bit more about sciences and really rounded off my scientific knowledge, and then sort of moved it into the business side of things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. I think one thing that you keep referring to is the international aspects to obviously your past degrees and past educations as well. So I was just curious, like, what's that brought into an aspect of coming into studying at UCL? London's quite diverse, but still it's quite interesting to hear, what else you've brought into your studies, I guess, from being the possibility of being able to have traveled so much.
Yeah, so I have lived all over the world, and I think what you kind of are taught is how to sort of find your own way, or like at least like what you don't like. And so growing up for me, it was much about like socializing and just exploring new cultures, exploring new things that you might have not normally been exposed to in your hometown. Because I come from like a tiny town in Belgium, and if I would have stayed there, like I wouldn't even have thought about London. I would have probably visited London or something. Belgians are very international in general, but we don't really move to a different country. And so for me, like growing up that way, like I moved like every 3 years. I think the longest I've ever lived in a country was maybe 6 years or something. It was in Germany. It was an amazing time, but like it was just like for me, moving is just such an important factor to me, and UCL and London are so international. You meet people from all over the world, and as well. That's why I did my undergraduate in Amsterdam and liberal arts and sciences. Like, you don't only get exposed to sciences, you get exposed to so many different things. So the international factor was more or less that you just get exposed to so much, and it's not just black and white. It's not just one thing that you learned, or like I would say entrepreneurship, you only learn about entrepreneurship. I just really love sciences and combining everything I possibly can. So yeah, the international factor is just what makes me me.
It's very interesting. I think, if I can use this term without confusing too many people, the word bubble is a great way of looking at it. I mean, to be stuck in one bubble and not really see the whole world, global view is very, important. I think especially if you're doing any international type subject, and that's almost all subjects, because they all have, to a degree, almost this international culture. You have science, which is, almost, accumulated sciences throughout the globe. You have finance, which is international, especially with the integration of economies through globalization. It's very important. And business, I mean, it's all, very important to understand other perspectives and stuff.
Yeah, and I think especially at UCL, it's such a diverse university. Like, it's crazy. All the nationalities we have here, from Russia to like China, like everywhere. If we want to circle back to science for a second, so your core modules are Science of Diseases, Bioscience Startups, Research and Business Case Project, Business for Bioscience, and Research and Practice.
You've done your research.
Yeah, of course I did. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what that actually means. Like, what exactly do you learn there? What's the difference to the just standardized entrepreneurship pathway?
So the subjects that you just listed are mainly the subjects that we were taught in term 1, where we finalize sort of our scientific knowledge. So in term 1, it was more or less that we were slightly exposed to businesses. So we learned, for example, bioscience startups, where we learned about spin-offs and stuff like that. And then essentially it was really much like, it was kind of like a repeat of what you have in your bachelor's. If you're a scientific student, like, it's nothing new. It is of course a lot of work, and it's like really to top off your scientific knowledge, but it wasn't anything new. It was just slightly new. And then in term 2, I would say, is where you really get like a flip into business. So term 1, I would say maybe like 80% science, 20% business. And then term 2 is like, I think, probably like 70% business and 30% science, where in term 2 is where it gets more interesting, which I loved as well. For example, I chose the subjects like entrepreneurial finance and decision risk and analysis, and they're nothing scientific related at all. Yeah. But it is something that if you go into that industry, like the startup industry, regardless if it's sciences or if it's media or whatever you choose, like, these are just certain critical factors that you need to know. There were also other modules that you could have chosen, for example, strategic project management or leadership and communication. And these are nothing to do with sciences, but the key component for bioscience entrepreneurship is that you have the scientific component that you just like finished off in term 1, and you bring it, like, you are the person that brings it into term 2, and you are the person that combines it into the business world. And then also, I think in term 2, you get a selection of a few pharmaceutical courses, like also like as a little extra scientific knowledge for you. For example, I had never done pharmaceutical like sort of thing, so I really wanted to do clinical pharmaceutics. So I learned about the regulatory processes and the manufacturing process of what goes around making a drug, which I thought was very critical in case I wanted to go into the pharmaceutical industry, or even create a startup myself. I mean, not that I'm planning to anytime soon, but it's really like, essentially you get more science to kind of finalize your science, and then you move it into the business, and then you also get the business perspective. Although I would say, though, for bioscience entrepreneurship students or anyone in the sciences, the business part was a bit more difficult because usually you're not that exposed to it. While with entrepreneurship people, this is probably something that like you've seen before and you practice every single day. But yeah, no, it's very interesting to kind of move into the business aspect from sciences.
It's funny. I think one thing that I think definitely separates, obviously, was all that, the word science, I guess, obviously. And I think one thing a lot of people would like to hear, especially if they're doing any course in the School of Management, is how can they get exposure to it? How can they learn and maybe develop some of their understandings? I know from my point of view, I'm quite lucky. My sister does physics. My father is an ex Oxford physicist as well. I did physics for A level, so I understand physics quite well.
Science runs in the family.
Yeah, science runs in the family. I seem to diverge a little from that, but yeah, I think my point being is I'm very lucky. I've got ways to keep up to date with stuff. I learn a lot. I've got a passion, but for those that have a passion, unfortunately, obviously, maybe or just want to know what's happening for maybe business opportunities, what would you suggest to them? Is there a way you suggest to learn, or maybe is there any research? Obviously, talking about economics or finance, you talk about the Economist almost, or Financial Times. Do you recommend any resources for yourself? Well, for the science side of it, if anyone wants to do more research, possibly. I know for myself, for example, it's something where I'm very aware of economics and finance, the way I look for, but science is not so much, maybe. I think that might be very common for most people in school management.
Yeah, I definitely run into this problem as well. There is definitely no main magazine or sort of like website that you can go to. I think there's a few called probably like Science Insider or something like that. I don't know what they're exactly called. It also really depends on what sort of science that you're interested in. Personally, I'm really into FemTech, so for example, my LinkedIn now is just completely FemTech because I just follow so many pages, I follow so many people, and I connect with people, I like start conversations with people. So for me, LinkedIn has been major bonus to just sort of like customizing what sort of like information I get on my feed. Besides that, I also love to go to events. Just a quick search on Eventbrite and you find a ton of free events even for all the students out there. You can always find me at some sort of like FemTech event. Like even if it doesn't necessarily like relate to me directly, I love going to events and just meet people, get out there, socialize, and just, get exposed to all sorts of science that you would normally probably not like have stumbled upon.
Yeah, I saw on your LinkedIn that you went to a FemTech summit. Can you elaborate on that? What was that?
There's a few that I've been to. I think the last one was a Barclays event, some sort of like startup.
Maybe sorry to cut you off before we talk about this anymore. Could you explain maybe to people that don't know what FemTech maybe is?
Yes, I can definitely explain. No, sure. This is my time. So FemTech is anything related to technology that really helps female health. So for example, this can be apps or wearables, but it can also be just any science that helps female health. And but it's usually technological, related because it's FemTech. And that's kind of it.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt you there.
And like what kind of events are there?
Well, usually these are just I usually go to the events where they talk about things. So they talk about FemTech. They have panels about they usually discuss a certain topic, like where is FemTech going? How is your journey in FemTech? How did your business? How do you start up in this world? Because I think with FemTech, everyone's calling it a niche industry. It really isn't. It affects so many people, but it's only now being talked about, and now there's more awareness of it. And so many people are like, how do you do it? What's the secret recipe? There is really no recipe. But it's just that so many startups, they really depend on market acceptance, because so many women, if you never talk about it, you don't know that you need it, and so many people they stumble upon it and they're like, oh wow, where was this all my life? It's just sort of the FemTech events are there just to discuss and really make sure that we're collaborating on these innovations, not that everything's happening just individually, because I think innovation and impact in any industry happens when we just get together and collaborate and meet people that you normally wouldn't meet on the street or something, really put together the scientists and the business people and then just discuss and see what the next steps we can do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think one last question to kind of build up on that now. Where do you think is FemTech going? Where do you think it's heading? The whole industry. What potential do you see there?
Well, I love it, so I think it's going to explode. You can find so many statistics, they're saying it's becoming this huge industry. I think it also is because, with equality and talking about women's health, once you get started on something, hopefully it's not slowing down, I personally believe that FemTech is, there's so many things that are going to become big, and many people have different focuses or trends that they want to follow. But I think from everyone that I've spoken to in the FemTech industry, once you start, you realize how badly you want to continue. And that like the people who start in FemTech rarely go outside of FemTech, and they kind of stick to it for a very long time. And I think if more people start discovering FemTech and what it can do for women's health, I mean, that's like more than half of our population, you know, like it's so important to so many people. And I think, yeah, it's an industry that hopefully continues growing.
Yeah, interesting. So that'll be great to see where that goes in a few years.
Yeah.
Then, I suppose.
Hopefully I'll contribute to that as well.
Got to keep an eye on everyone
follow
there in
that,
that whole
of course.
market. That'll be very interesting. So I think that pretty much wraps it up then.
Yeah.
So thank you very much so much for taking the time to come out. I understand you obviously had to come to campus, and we appreciate it so much.
I
So
love
thank
it
you so
here.
much. Yes,
Yeah,
you've got a
full
great
campus.
Thank you so much. So I think that wraps up. Thank you very much for joining us. Remember to like, subscribe, smash that like button and the bell
bell,
icon.
yeah.
That's the other one. There's always the last one. Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and
And I'll see you next episode.
see you
Thank
next
you for
episode.
having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Bye.